Pay attention. It's a good job there's one professional in the room.
Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm Simon of Savage Reads and today I'm back with my mum. We're going to be doing something special for the Women's Prize. I have not yet, in 4 years of BookTube, made a tag video. So I thought with mum, we would do an original Women's Prize tag. Now, the 10 questions that we go through will be in the description box below and we would love to see your responses to doing this too. And if you do it, just link in the comments down below and then we can go and find it. So the first question is, which was the first Women's Prize winner you read? When did you read it and what did you think? Mum.
I think it's probably this one. What really shocked me was I thought I always wrote the date when I finish a book inside the books, but I obviously only started doing that more recently. I absolutely adored it when I read it. I read it, I think, pretty much as soon as it came out.
I don't actually have with me the first winner that I read, and that's because it was On Beauty by Zadie Smith. It wasn't the greatest success for me at the time. I think I didn't get some of the layers that were in it that I probably would have got more now. I did say that I'd read it again because I know you really loved it when you read it.
Yeah, I really loved it. I only read it relatively recently. I'm really glad I did. It was part of the reading all the 25 winners. And
you haven't finished?
No, I know. I've just started another one today.
Oh, she's a tease. Question 2. Which author have you read because of the prize who has now become a firm favourite?
Well, actually, I should have answered that before because that would be Valerie Martin. She definitely it excited an interest in me in her writing because not a lot, but quite a lot of the other authors I'd read prior to. So although I'm really keen to, well, no, I'm going to be quiet because I think that might be one of the questions coming up.
Well, mine is Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I hadn't read her before, and this was the first of hers that I read because it had won the Women's Prize, Half Yellow Sun, and it has remained one of my absolute favourite books of all time. And since then, I have gone on to read Purple Hibiscus and both of her non-fiction. I've still got, though, her short story collection and Americana to read. I think this actually was the book that got me the most excited about the Women's Prize, and then I went on and read more books. I'd never read anything quite like this before. It must have been in my sort of mid to late 20s.
I've read Americana and I absolutely loved it.
3. Which favourite author of yours has yet to win the prize?
It's such a hard question, a really hard question. I chose Sarah Dunant. I love historical fiction. She particularly writes about the Renaissance and she writes about Italy and, all places that I find fascinating. She gives a voice to women, who have been silent at periods of history. And I just absolutely love the way she writes as well. I find them unputdownable. If I start one, you just lose me for however long it takes me to finish it.
Okay, well, mine is going to be Kate Atkinson. And
I knew it, yeah.
Human Croquet was the first of hers that I read, and it was on Gran's shelves, so Mum's mum. I think the way she writes about people and there's always sort of a dark humour to it that kind of actually can be powerful because she'll make a joke and then she'll almost pull the rug from under you and say, why are you laughing at that? She always does something that I'm not quite expecting.
Yeah.
So I would like Kate to at some point win it. Question 4. Which winning shortlisted or longlisted novel has surprised you the most and why?
Oh, I don't think I was expecting that question.
Accepted to you, Louise.
I can answer it though, actually. I think it would probably be this. I think I thought it was going to be, this sounds awful, but I thought it was going to be much lighter than I feel it is. I know Paul would disagree with me, but I think there's a real depth to this very short novel. So that would be my choice.
Okie doke. I've got 2. I cheated with this one. And so the first one is Larry's Party. I thought this might be all about a white middle class, middle-aged man, blah, 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 moaning about the fact that feminism had come about. And it's not at all. It's such a clever book where Larry is he's never the figure of fun, but it is all about the women around him and he's sort of bemused by it all as it goes on. And then the other one was Stay With Me by Ayobami Adebayo, and I absolutely loved this. And when I was initially sold it, I was told it was kind of a book about a marriage that, you know, was going through quite a lot of difficulties. And I kind of was a bit like, not sure if that's kind of my bag. You read it like you would a thriller, as we kind of follow this couple as they try to have a child, and then a second wife is brought in, and all sorts of things start to twist.
There are some scenes in that book which is still very much in my head. And you know what I'm like for remembering what I've read.
So, I hope you're expecting this question, Mum. If you could be a judge with 4 women, which would you want to judge the prize with, and why?
Oh, I lost sleep over this question. Because it's such an exciting, you know, wouldn't it be amazing to do something like that? So I've got about 20 people on my list, but I honed it down to 4. The first one I chose was Maxine Peake. She's a fantastic actress. She's done so much for women's profile. She writes wonderful stuff for radio, and also she's a northern voice. So I thought she would be a fantastic choice. The second person I chose was a Yinkin. I think it's really important to involve young writers. But I thought her background and her youth and she's got a real appreciation of, you know, the sort of classics of literature as well as contemporary literature. So I thought she would be a good choice. And my third choice was Emily Maitlis. She's really erudite. She's got a really good grasp of current affairs. And at the moment, I think she's being unfairly treated by the media, because I suspect that had Jeremy Paxman said the things she said the other day, it wouldn't be an issue. My final choice, actually, if I were to be a judge, was to choose to take along one of my sixth form students, because they are the future of women's reading, or you know, women's writing, more to the point. And I do think that, you know, we need to be really, really tapping into a youth audience to make sure that this very important prize continues.
Wow, that's a very good selection. Mine's a little bit different, I won't lie. My first one, I wanted to choose an author who's both like into poetry and the lyrical nature of everything, but also a great storyteller. And so I chose Bernardine Evaristo. I'd love to judge with her. So what I've noticed as well recently, speaking about young voices, she's really promoting younger voices. I think that would kind of come through. Then I want to kind of have a politician. And at first I wanted Jacinda, but then I thought, actually, she's in New Zealand, so that might be a little bit tricky. I thought, right, I'm going to go with Jess Phillips.
She's actually was one of the people who was on my longer list.
I just think Jess Phillips, there'd be no mucking about. You'd be just getting on with it. And then I chose Annika Rice. You've seen my reaction when Annika Rice is in a room. I just don't know what to do with myself.
It's embarrassing.
And then finally, I chose Melanie Sykes, because I have such a laugh with her anyway. And I think you need someone that makes you laugh while you're doing it. From judging prizes before, it can get very tense, and you need people that will sort of crack a joke at the right point. And also, I just know that, again, she's a really, really big reader. So I haven't chosen you, Mum, because you'd be judging it a different year. Mum is available for future judging, just putting that out. Number 6, which favourite author of yours who is lesser known would you like to see get a wider audience, and which book of theirs would you recommend?
Again, I thought this was a very tough question. When you say lesser known, that might be a bit offensive, but I hope I won't offend this particular author. But I chose Youve and Ivy. I find that, you know, when you buy books as presents and things like that, I think probably I've bought this book more than any other as a present to pass on to other people, which says something to me. I love this book. It's called The Snow Child. It has the quality of a sort of fable or a fairy story. It's about a couple who go to live in a really remote sort of forest, and they're getting on a bit. They've struggled to have children. And it's clear that they would desperately have loved to have children. And then this little girl appears in the snow, or does she? And I just think it's absolutely beautiful. It's beautifully written. And then her second book, To the Bright Edge of the World, as well. Absolutely love that too. It's about a couple, but they are adventuring, sort of doing the original exploration of that part of Canadian territory. And it's just, again, it's just really beautiful, and it's about the exploration, and you kind of feel you're exploring with the husband in particular. I think the husband's away and she's left behind, but also it's a portrait of a relationship that is just beautifully done, and she writes about love in both of those novels, I think, in a very humane and clever way. Yeah.
Did an event with Owen where Mum was in the audience, and I'd asked all these questions, and I was like, oh, does anybody want to ask a question now? So Mum put her hand up, and Mum asked a question that was so much better than anything that I'd asked before. I was furious. So I remember telling the audience, don't bring your mum to events. I have 2 responses to this one, and the first one is Bethan Roberts, who I absolutely love. Now, I've not read this yet. This is all about Elvis and his mum. And Plug Ahoy. This is me and Melanie Sykes' next book group choice. I'll link our book club down below. But she writes amazingly, and I read her book, My Policeman, which is set in the 1950s before homosexuality was legal, and it's about a policeman who's having an affair with a woman and a man, and it's how that relationship goes on for decades. It's really like. Then she wrote Mother Island, which is a really, really interesting look at what makes a better mother, someone who chooses to be a mother's child or someone who biologically had a child. That's really interesting. And then the other one, and I don't mean lesser known in a bad way, also is who people might not have heard of. And Alison Moore is one such author. I think she's incredible. And He Wants is just, it's so brilliant. It's about a man who is waiting for a friend of his who comes out of prison to turn up, and it takes you in directions you just would not expect. I think it's utterly amazing. And she's now, I think, got 6 books out. 7. Which book published before the prize started would you have loved to have won in its day, and why? Mum.
So again, such a difficult question. I'm going to cheat now because you've sometimes given multiple answers, and this, you won't be able to see what this is because this is a very treasured copy. This was actually belonged to my mum, and it was one of my mum's, Simon's Grand's favourite books. It's Middlemarch by George Eliot.
I remember it being on your shelves.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. And I actually didn't read this until, well, this decade, so relatively recently for me, because I read a lot of classics when I was younger. It is just a whole community in one book. Like, you really get to know them, and just the characterization, the plot, everything. Just love it. But that wasn't, in the end, that wasn't my final choice. Because actually, this lady, I have read most of her books. It's Edith Wharton, House of Mirth.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good choice.
Absolutely love Edith Wharton. I think she writes beautifully. It's spare, and it's clever, and it's witty, and it's dark. She also, you know, she's a very interesting person. Some of her letters are really interesting to read, particularly to her husband. She was quite clever in terms of her own finances and all those sorts of things, which, bearing in mind she was born in the 1800s, again, I think is very fascinating. And she also did lots of things for women in the First World War. So yeah, I think House of Mirth by Edith Wharton. If you've never read anything by her, I recommend her. And actually, going back to my choice of a sixth former, years ago when we used to be able to do 100% coursework for A-level, it was a student who introduced me to Edith Wharton.
Oh, wow.
Because she wanted to write about The Reef, which is another of her books. So there you go, Edith Wharton.
I absolutely love the House of Mirth. I didn't actually consider it, and I don't know why, because that's really good. Well, I do know why, because there's only one choice. Can you guess what it might be, Mum?
I think it might begin with R.
Yes, you'd be right. It's Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This book I love, partly because it got me back into reading after a long time of not, but also because I think this has everything I want in a book. It has that gothic element. I think the writing is beautiful. I think the characters are fantastic. There's mystery. I just think this is an absolute, I do think it's a masterpiece. I am denied about whether I was going to say it then. Also, I just feel like she was never in her day celebrated as much as she probably should have been. So that would have been a surprise to absolutely nobody. So question 8. Which has been your favourite of all the winners so far?
Unfortunately, I haven't got the book on my shelf, which shocked me, and then I remembered that I had given it to somebody who was very ill. It's The Road Home by Rose Tremaine. It's the story of a male Polish immigrant to the UK and his experience of living here. And oh my goodness, I mean, I think, you know, our attitude towards immigration leaves a lot to be desired in this country, and I think if more people read books like that, maybe they would feel differently. And I absolutely adore Rose Tremaine as a writer. She can't do any wrong for me. One of the things I admire about her most is the fact that she has written about so many different subjects, times, places. You never quite know what's coming next with her, and I just think she is fantastic. So yeah, The Road Home would be my choice.
Mine is Small Island by Andrew Levy. I just think it's such an incredible book. It gives voice to the black voices in the UK, or those that have come over to the UK during the war and had fought for us. It also gives voice to women who are stuck at home, and I think those two angles really, really made it stand out. But also it's a book that's full of heart, full of hope.
Your stepfather is currently reading that.
Oh, really?
I'm getting even less sense out of him than usual because he's so engrossed in it.
You can't forget Queenie or Hortense. Once you've read this book, they will be with you forever. Their voices will be with you forever. And also I've heard Andrea Levy recorded the audiobook, and apparently it is phenomenal. Mercedes listened to it and she absolutely loved it. Right, so the penultimate question, but the final question for us: is there a book or two that's been published since April 2020 that you've read or are anticipating reading you'd like to see on the list next year? Mum.
The trouble is, I can't remember when things are published, so I struggled with this question. However, there is one book which I'm really desperate to read, which has just come out recently. It's Rodham by Curtis Sittenfeld. Because I read the one about Laura Bush, loved it. Just the depth of it and how thorough it was, and also that sort of period in American history seen from that perspective. I found it fascinating, and the fact that it was fiction rather than non-fiction I really enjoyed. I thought that was quite cheeky and quite daring. And this book, Rodham, she's imagining that Hillary Clinton had never married Bill, and where her life, you know, and I really, really desperate to read that. And I'm also really desperate to read Anne Tyler, and she's got a new book out called The Redhead at the Side of the Road, I think.
Yeah.
And I really want to read that as well, because I love Anne Tyler. I like the way she writes about small things, you know, about domestic detail.
I would imagine possibly the new Rose Tremaine.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
The reason I let you have three there, Mum, is because I cheated and have three for this. The first one is Charlotte Wood's The Weekend. I absolutely loved Charlotte Wood's previous novel, The Natural Way of Things. It's a really angry novel about a group of women who they've been drugged, they wake up and they're in this sort of almost like prison, but it's just this fenced off area in the middle of nowhere in Australia. They all have one thing in common, and that's that they told on a famous man. And so she follows what happens to the characters. This is totally, totally different. This is set over a Christmas weekend in Australia. And this is about three friends who are going to clear the house of their friend who's recently died. And it soon becomes apparent that person really kept those friends together. And it looks at the stereotypes of women in their 70s. It looks at friendship. And I just thought it was brilliant. So really, really, that one I would love to see. Then, this is a proof. Mum, I'm sure you'd agree with this one. The Mission House by Caris Davis.
Oh, yes.
This is
I want to just grab it.
It's set in India, and it tells of a man who goes out there and he accidentally slights a cab driver, and then things get really dark, and it's brilliant, and it takes you to places that you wouldn't expect. And then finally, this debut novel is one of my favourite books of the year, and it really surprised me because it's got horses on the cover, and I don't like horses, they know too much. And it's also set in the Wild West, so it's country and western, and it's How Much of These Hills is Gold by C. Pam Zhang. And this tells of two siblings who've been orphaned. They actually have the body of their father in their bag as they leave the village they've lived in. And it tells of how they then go on to try and find themselves. But what she's done is she's reimagined the gold rush of the American West as if Chinese immigrants had already come over. Honestly, I think this is just phenomenal. I mean, it's one of those books where every single section reveals something quite, well, something that you just wouldn't expect. It's got that Karis Davisness about it. It constantly surprises you. And I love it. Absolutely love it. The final question, which we're going to ask you, but we're not going to answer, is which book, question 10, which book on the current shortlist would you like to see win and why? And the reason that we're not going to give you that answer is because we'll be talking about that at the beginning of September before the actual winner is announced. But I just want to hear what everyone else thinks.
That would be something that would put me off judging. Because we've said this before many a time, but I do think that was a phenomenal long list. Deciding the shortlist must have been hard enough, but going from that shortlist to a single winner.
We wanted to do this because we just wanted to say thank you to the prize, really, for being so brilliant and bringing so many excellent books to us, and also do it on the day that the winner would have been announced if there hadn't been a pandemic. I mean, there's still going to be an announcement on the 8th or 9th of September. Who knows? By then we might even be in the same room. Please, please, please have a go at this tag. And once you've done it, let us know. We will be so interested to see what people say.
And just make that whole women's prize book, it just bringing awareness, further awareness of women's fiction, which is obvious. Snowball.
Yeah.
It's like a snowball.
I'm sure there's authors and books that have been longlisted or shortlisted that I've missed that I would love to find out more about. And that's what I love about the Women's Prize. So, yeah. But thanks for doing that with me, Mum.
It's been a pleasure.
And don't forget, Mum is on Instagram now and Twitter. I will link both of those down below as well so that you can follow her bookish adventures elsewhere. But thank you, Mum. I'll be back in another video very soon. Mum will be back with me when we talk about the next 4 winners of the Women's Prize that we haven't talked about yet. It's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
Bye.
Bye.